very well now. I'm okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Can I be heard? Right?
Yeah, you're good. So, okay, we will just start our own recordings. Yeah. So, Mega.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
So, are we rolling?
We're rolling.
Okay, fine. So, why don't we just dive into it? Comrade Fagunwa, it's quite a pleasure. We've talked in various other forums about the ASUU strike and about numerous other subjects that are relevant to left politics and liberation in Nigeria. But we've never had the opportunity to talk to you here as Nigerian Scam. So it's really good to have you here, and thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Nice one. So today we thought that we would actually talk a bit about the ongoing ASUU strike, which has been on since February and which seems to have entered a new phase of recent with the protest that was launched by the NLC last week, a kind of couple of days of protest in solidarity with ASUU, and with recent moves by the government, it seems, to bring a new phase of negotiations to the table. So we thought at this stage it would be good to actually talk to somebody who's an ASUU member, who's a radical, and who can shed some light on what has been happening and what is likely to happen. As I said, the strike has gone on since around February this year, and of course, it follows on similar strikes that have taken place. I mean, including the one that took place in 2020. And our listeners would broadly be aware of the IPPS issue and ASUU's long-standing demands for better funding and remuneration. But can you provide a bit of background and context for this strike? So what is it about, and what have the major turning points been since it commenced in February?
Thanks, Comrade Said, for the question, and thanks for also having me here. It's always a pleasure. But the point around this is that currently we have actually stayed in a country, or we are existing in a society whose ruling class are really not interested again. They are not interested. They are not hiding this. They are no more interested in funding public education. And they've said this publicly. They've said this privately also. They've come out. Their ministers have reported this, that their own aspiration at this time is to support the proliferation of private universities. As a matter of fact, sometimes ago, the executive chairperson of the NUC, the executive secretary of NUC, at a public gathering, you can imagine, said that the Nigerian populace haven't seen anything. Their own interest and their agenda ultimately is for us to have more private universities in this country. They said so. But the ultimate thing about this ongoing strike action, is the refusal of the Nigerian state to honor the agreement it entered with ASUU as far back as 2009. It's quite backward, because you entered an agreement, as far back as 2009, and till this material point in time, you refuse to man up over that agreement. You refuse to honor that agreement. It's like you are beating someone, you are beating a child, and you are really telling that child not to cry, because now ASUU is crying through this strike action, and the federal government is saying that ASUU is not justified by this ongoing strike action. And that is nothing but an illusion. It's quite crazy, really. But the ultimate thing about this is that no matter how much you talk about it, the university system right now is it's currently in a shambles state. There is a crisis of funding across public universities in this country. Across, you have the crisis of funding. The subventions aren't coming as expected. The allocations aren't coming as expected. Beyond that, we're also living in a country where the superinflation rate, is beyond what one can begin to joke around with. In spite of this condition, the federal government is saying that academics are not actually entitled to a salary review. Whereas a review was last agreed as far back as 2009. It was last agreed that the salary scale of academics in the country will be reviewed as far back as 2009. You can imagine what has happened from 2009 till this time. What has happened to the economy of this country? And so that is why it is currently in the most preposterous state, in the sense that no professor in this country earns above 400,000 naira. That in itself, it's almost unbelievable. That's the reality. That's the reality of the country we're living in.
Above how much? Sorry, could you say that again?
400,000 naira. 400,000 naira.
Right.
No
Yeah.
professor in this country is earning above 400,000 naira. And then, because you see, just so backward, because we also have elements in this country that are saying that they want our public universities to be like what exists in the Western countries and what have you. Forgetting the fact that the university system in these countries, is being funded in the most unbelievable manner. Because every other time they are talking about what is obtainable out there. We want to get what is obtainable, but concerning the welfare of lecturers, that is not obtainable. So it's quite unbelievable what's happening right now. But again, it's a product of the fact that this country is currently being judged by failed elements. Failed elements, those that are not interested in the transformation of the society. On the other hand, they want the society to be progressed more. And this is just a reflection of that. Just this morning, the Minister of Education gave another blunder by saying that even if they agree to the demands of ASUU, there are some certain aspects of the demands that would only be for federal universities, but not for state universities. But of course, our president had to come out this afternoon to publicly condemn that kind of statement. But then it's a reflection of the divide and rule tactic, that they've been using all along. They divide the union, members of the union in order to pay the demands. But ASUU is not in any way going to be, wavered by this backward progressive statement and doings by the federal government.
Yeah. How about this IPPS issue? It just occurs to me that there might be some people listening who don't really have a firm grip of that. I understand that that's one of the bones of contention.
That's right. The title of the demands for the ongoing strike action can actually be grouped into three main parts. The question of revitalization, that the university system has got to be funded, adequate funding. We must have adequate hostels, across the public universities, laboratories, teaching halls, must be well equipped. These are the questions. These are the things around the question of revitalization of the university system itself. Then you have the part of IPPIS. IPPIS is a payroll platform that the federal government came up with recently. A payroll platform that the federal government came up with recently. They proposed it to the entirety of members of their ministries, the civil servants, and the idea is that like a single road payment account, something that the entirety of those that will be paid in the university or in the civil service, that it is only one office that will be in charge of the payment of all these workers.
So it's a sort of attempt to centralize all the payments of everyone who works for the federal government.
Exactly. But behind the scene also is that we have found out that this is actually a byproduct of a proposal being suggested by World Bank. Like IPPI is nothing but a package from World Bank, you know. What World Bank is saying with this is that since you have borrowed so much money from us, we want to help you in a way to ensure that you know the payment, how you control your fund, you know, it's being done adequately. You know, that we ensure that there won't be loopholes. So the IPPIS something was proposed, but as we have found out again, the IPPIS is nothing but another platform that has been created to siphon the collective wealth of the Nigerian people.
And this was a Nigerian sound.
And then, I mean, we don't have to go far. The Attorney General of the Federation recently, you know, was caught up in a corrupt case, you know, and then, lo and behold, the office of the Attorney General of the Federation is, you know, is in charge of the IPPIS payment something. But it will amaze you to know that those monies that they said the Secretary General of the Federation Bank, you know, moved with, are also monies that are actually gotten from the IPPIS payment something. You know, these are people's salaries that were people that have been short-changed. You know what it is. Ordinarily, you are entitled to 90,000 naira. For an example, you know, as your salary, but you are getting 65,000 naira. No one is giving you any explanation as to why that. I mean, why that is happening. This has been a trend. This has been a trend in the civil service. This has been a trend in the ministries. But workers in those places are not talking. Workers in those places are not talking. So IPPIS is nothing but a platform that has been created for them to continue to make the vast resources of this country. And
so one could say it's a kind of attempt to centralize the skimming of people's salaries.
Exactly, that's what it is. But you know, ASUU has been able to, you know, demystify that. And ASUU is saying that if indeed you are interested, genuinely interested in centralizing payment across the world, then you must do it, you know, in a more civilized way. And that's why ASUU, you know, a union of intellectuals, there is now, I mean, ASUU has come up with an alternative known as UTAS, you know, but they are scared of UTAS. You can imagine, you know, because they carried out so much examinations on UTAS, and even their best examiners, you know, couldn't hide the fact that UTAS performed very well, but they are scared of implementing or accepting UTAS. You can imagine, all because they have an ulterior motive with IPPIS, you know. But you know, ASUU is not going to back down with us, actually.
That's interesting, and I think we might come back to that because it's a sort of interesting example of a union actually developing a tool, you know, that forced the government to consider the union's alternative as a serious alternative, you know. So I think that's maybe worth coming back to. But one thing we've wondered is that the strike seems to have attracted more solidarity and support from other organized groups this time. I think maybe even more than usual. So obviously there was the protest organized by the NLC and the trade union centers last week, but there have also been various student union protests that have kicked off. I mean, notably the NANS Zone D, one of the more radical cells of NANS, the National Association of Nigerian Students, for those who might not know. So we've seen such solidarity protests and support messages, right? But it seems like, you know, this wasn't always the case in previous ASUU actions. So how would you account for this? Are we seeing a kind of cultural shift whereby students and workers see ASUU as fighting for them? Or do you think this support has more to do with what people's wider disenchantment with the current government? Or, I mean, is there a third possibility, like maybe something ASUU is doing differently this time?
The mass disenchantment with the state, the Nigerian state, consequent to its failure, you know, to, you know, come up with alternative to the current economic crisis that indeed the ruling class, members of the ruling class have created, you know, the crisis of insecurity, you know, the crisis of, the economy itself.
Yeah.
All of the entirety of this crisis have really, snowballed into what members of the ruling class did not even envisage in the first instance. So there is that, and we cannot treat that factor with negligence. I think that factor is extremely important. But beyond that, again, before the strike action, we must also record the fact that we lost quite a number of students across the first class generation of our universities. We lost about 2 students in OAU, one in I think LASU, another 2 students at the University of Benin. To the backwardness of the clinics, the clinics on the campuses. We lost quite a number of students to the backwardness of the clinics, and that's really, for me, because there were protests, there were demonstrations, sometimes around across this university, there were demonstrations, and you have that at hand. The mass of students are aware of this, and so you then have ASUU making some legitimate demands around the need for funding, around the need for the clinics on campuses to be equipped, the laboratories and what have you. So naturally, this is coming at the right time. And that is why you find a student body or a student organization, condemning the current strike action, except those that are being used by members of the ruling class. Like NAS at a point in time, was saying all sorts of rubbish, but eventually even fellow ESCO members of NAS and members, strong members within that same union began to speak against the president, their president. Yes.
Yeah.
Fellow members began to.
So you're suggesting that actually at a certain point there was a sort of bottom-up pressure that the leadership had to respond to in support of the ASUU strike?
Oh yes. I mean, the union was forced actually. Because you can remember, they were invited to Abuja, by the Minister of Education. And at that particular gathering, the minister was trying to buy them, you can imagine, trying to buy them into believing that ASUU is the problem. And quite a number of them were actually buying into that backward narrative, not until members of the ruling class, in their usual fashion, dismissed members of that union, the NASU guys, in the most backward manner. They were treated with disdain and what have you. So they themselves now have the practical understanding of what ASUU has been going through. And that then, like a 360-degree something, they have to change totally when it comes to their orientation. So right now we are experiencing, ASUU is experiencing a wide support, nationwide support, clearly because of the current, backwardness, that seems to be, that seems to be visible in every sector, in every sector in the country. There's no denying that fact, But beyond that, ASUU has also done some of its assignments. And what do I mean by this? Before the strike action, ASUU went on several consultative meetings. Several consultative meetings were held. There were public speaking events wherein ASUU educated members of the public of the possibility of a strike action because of this and that and what have you. And then, the members of the religious bodies were invited. Student organizations, members of student organizations were invited. Members of the civil societies were invited. This was sometimes around early February, where they had the sensitization, because the national gave a directive that members should be sensitized, and beyond that, members of the public should be sensitized also about the possibility of a strike action. And I think that is extremely important and interesting, because that went a long way in bringing so much persons into the folds of into the fold of the demands of ASUU, so that demands of ASUU now becomes public demands.
That's interesting. Following up on your insights about how ASUU actually engaged in these kinds of sensitization efforts ahead of the strike, and how, if I was hearing you correctly, that you were suggesting that this has had an impact on the level of public support for the strike. So then I was wondering the extent to which, radical unionists like yourself are actually able to shape the ASUU agenda, be it in terms of the demands that they pursue, or be it the sorts of interventions, such as those sorts of sensitization efforts that they pursue. Like, to what extent can members such as yourself, particularly radical members, actually influence the overall ASUU agenda, or is it more of a kind of top-down situation? So I suppose it's really a question about the internal politics of the union.
Oh, you see, the thing about ASUU is that if only the Nigerian state would learn the workings within ASUU, the modus operandi, how decisions are being passed and what have you, because the Nigerian state has so much to learn from ASUU. I think, and I'm not in any way I don't want to sound patronizing in any way, but I think ASUU today is currently in a position of demonstrating what a true democratic organization can be like, in the sense that ASUU operates a bottom to the top decision making kind of structure, in the sense that, yes, and I think this is amazing in the way that you then have that affinity to your union, in the sense that you're not being treated as a stranger. This bottom to the top decision making structure, which ASUU has been riding on for decades, such an interesting one, in the sense that when this ongoing strike action, when it was going to commence, the national, instructed all local branches to deliberate on the demands, to deliberate on the issues at hand. And that not only to deliberate, but to also assess the possibility of a strike action, if indeed, these demands, are worthy of we engaging in a strike action. And I can remember, at our own local branch over here, members debated these issues. Members were saying that, that there's a necessity for a salary review, and, what ASUU normally would do is that all of these resolutions from these local branches, will be aggregated and will be passed across to the national. So, for instance, I attended one of the zonal meetings at the University of Ibadan, wherein the national again, because there were several consultative meetings. This is what people don't know. ASUU will never declare a strike action overnight. That's not what ASUU will never do that. And you won't find some elements in Abuja, saying they are national school members of ASUU and that they want to declare and they want to call off the strike. No. ASUU don't, because the national is just ought to be a reflection of the, aggregate demands of those at the local branches. So prior to the February something, the local branches were told to assess all of these demands and, really decide if indeed they are worthy of a strike action. And at our own branch, we said yes, the resolution that was reached was that yes, and across most branches, of course, the aggregate, decision, was that there's a necessity for a strike action. And, the president, of course, had to go, to the public to say that ASUU is not commencing on it. One is, I think the first one was about 4 weeks warning strike action, and you see that within those weeks, what was happening? Within those weeks, the national again, sent some words back to all branches that are they prepared to take the strike action beyond 4 weeks. Can you imagine that level, that kind of, that kind of tactic? You understand? Are they ready? Are they getting prepared? You know, and you know, of course, you know, because the issues have gotten beyond what anyone can just, you know, play over. You know, the fact that, you know, nothing is happening in the, you know, across the universities and what have you. So everyone seems to be tired. You understand what I'm saying? So, you know, the response again was that we are ready, you know, and the strike then would then move to what it is now, how to bring that to this time. If ASUU is going to call up this strike action, no one will sit in Abuja and call it up. You know, eventually they've signed the agreement, those demands and what have you. The president of ASUU cannot just continuously, you know, call up the strike action. That's not how it works in ASUU.
Yeah.
You know, the national will then go back to the branches. We asked its ESCO members to go back to the branches and then, you know, read out those demands that have been, I mean, those agreements that have been reached with federal government, you know, have those agreements, you know, read out to the hearing of every member. So that every member will now then say that, okay, we are satisfied with this agreement. And that if it turned out to be that most academics in this country are not satisfied, most members of ASUU are not satisfied with the agreement that has been reached with federal government, the strike action will linger.
Well, you know, I think that's quite a positive model or positive kind of insight into ASUU's method of collective decision making, and you know, I'm quite happy to hear that you know, you find it to be a fairly democratic process. I think Emeka is about ready to pose his question, so I'll just hand over to him.
Oh, that's like you say, Said. That's quite a bit of information. You know, I mean, the way Comrade Topper lays it, you know, bare. You know, I mean, with regards to the way that ASUU is structured. You know, I've also heard, you know, for some of my own friends who are academics, that it's you know, it's also the case that that structure is totally opposite of the way that you know, the Nigerian state itself has structured you know, the country. So I'm speaking here of geopolitical divides. So I understand that ASUU doesn't also, its structure doesn't pay attention to that in that sense. So that the zones aren't reflective, you know, if you like, of that, you know, the geopolitical divides that we have. So that you can have a school in the middle belt be a member of a zone that is presumably southwestern. But I think, you know, I agree with Comrade Topper that there's a lot that, you know, maybe the Nigerian state can learn from us. Am I being heard? Oh, okay. Nice. So, I mean, I think on that note, you know, just listening to you, I have this couple of questions I'd like to ask, and then I'll just flip it around and start from, like, you know, say the bottom. I'm curious, you know, given all that, you know, you said about the process, you know, the decision-making process within the union. I'm curious, and I asked this question basically because, I mean, I was locked down in Ibadan myself. It might interest you to know that I was actually locked down on the University of Ibadan campus for maybe even 3 months during the pandemic. My understanding of the struggle of the union became clearer, you know, at that time. You know, I know how bad things were for I and some of my own friends in terms of, you know, meals, electricity, what. So, I mean, I fully understand what the working conditions are within the university, using the University of Ibadan as a case in point. And then, but the one thing I took away from that period was the level of camaraderie, the kind of solidarity that, that was able to inject. So that's where I'm coming from with this question. How would you say that, the COVID-19 pandemic, impacted that 9-month strike period of 2020, and how much of it, helped strengthen this resolve that you now speak of, of academics in terms of solidarity with the union? Because I understand that hasn't always been the case. It almost seemed as if it was impossible for all the majority of the academics, who are of course members of the union, to agree on ways to go. So I'm wondering how much that struggle, because ASUU was embroiled in a strike during the pandemic, meant that monies weren't coming. Lecturers had to devise all sorts of means to cater to their needs and that of their family. I saw it firsthand. And also, would it be wrong, to suggest that the pandemic also contributed to bridging the divide, between academics and students on the one hand, and to an extent, I say this with a bit of a caveat, to an extent, that divide between town and gown.
I think what the pandemic, and I totally agree with you that there must be a connection. But again, the strike action of 2020 again came at a time where, of course, the pandemic, the lockdown was on, and generally to some extent, the government, expressed a level of indifference to the strike action, because they felt that there's an ongoing lockdown, so they weren't really taken aback. They weren't concerned, about the importance or the necessity for students to be on campus, but, because there's what we call, dialectics, because when you walk along a certain path and you think maybe you are doing that for your best interest, you might end up working against your own, demise. So what then eventually happened is that what they were running away from, subsequently, dug their grave. What do I mean by this? They felt it was okay for students to be off campus, to be in their private homes and what have you. But you and I, we are quite aware of the fact that became the basis upon which we had the NSAS protest. Because students in their numbers were the ones that mobilized across the states, across states, across the country, to propagate the idea of end to police brutality. So there is that on one hand, and I quite agree with the fact that in the long run, this became the basis upon which ASUU is in fact enjoying a nationwide solidarity today. Because there's this anti-government, sentiment that seems to that currently seems to, run across the street. That currently runs across the street. It runs across the street because, the prevailing conditions, economic conditions, and social conditions in the country are just so, the terrible state. So ordinarily, you cannot but expect this mass support that ASUU is enjoying. But the lockdown, the pandemic itself, number one, also exposed the backwardness of the Nigerian state, in the sense that you have a government that is saying that she doesn't have the resources, the wherewithal to meet the demands of ASUU. This was in the early months of the year 2020, that they don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the resources and what have you. But you and I, we are also aware of the fact that more than any other time, in the recent political history of this country, much loans were taken in the year 2020 from the agent of international finance capital, IMF, World Bank, loaned the Nigerian state so much money to the point that they were loaning them close to about 30 billion US dollars, sometimes around December 2020, for water projects that people did not, World Bank had to loan them money for water projects in December 2020, and then, they were taking all of these monies, they were, in the most backward manner, the most criminally minded manner, doing all sorts of things. And then beyond that, the COVID-19, what do we call it? Funds that were coming from IMF, that were coming from Britain, that were coming from the foreign donors, were actually going into the purchase of, Indomies that were subsequently being kept in warehouses. They were under the lock and key of members of the ruling class, hiding them away from the people, and the people.
Comrade, I'm just laughing at you saying Indomies.
They had to. That shows the primitivity of the African ruling class,
Oh
the
my
elite.
God.
They are so primitive that they will steal anything from anyone. The Nigerian members of the Nigerian ruling class will steal from mad person. They will steal a mad person's clothes. That's to tell you how primitive they are, ready to steal anything. Because you can imagine stealing Indomie, and you are quite aware of the fact that if you lock this Indomie in your warehouse for more than 2 months or so, it will get spoiled. And people were even getting these Indomies, and some person cannot even hit the Indomies, like in Oshobo, the Indomies that they subsequently meant in a particular warehouse. They couldn't even hit it, because it has gotten spoiled to the point that it was not redeemable. No amount of hot water will redeem the Indomie.
There's a metaphor in there somewhere.
So that's interesting. I mean, I'm happy. In fact, I'm laughing here because you kind of, in your response, kind of set me up for my next question. But before I do, let me just say that you got me thinking about. Just because you mentioned Indomie, Said isn't the only one who is excited.
Relax. I didn't say I was excited.
I knew that the excitement. I knew that excitement would cause.
Is that what you're going to have this evening? Is that
Indomie. I know they touch out. No worry. But yeah, comrade. Indomie and SARS. Those two things resonate with me. They resonate with me because once I left Ibadan, and then during the NSAS thing, once matters got out of hand, this friend of mine who lectures at the university in Ibadan sends me a message and says, "Can you imagine how much these guys have stored up in warehouses when we've been dey hungry during NSAS, we dey pluck mangoes, sometimes feeding na how one guy with one how do you call them, good Samaritan, gather akara balls and tuntum and yam come share for staff club. It was crazy, and the guy it was when the guy sent me this WhatsApp message asking me if I could see the link between starvation that university lecturers and even non-academic teachings. If you can imagine what university lecturers went through, you can imagine what members of SANU and non-academics went through. That disparity in pay grades, it didn't quite even matter whether money wasn't even coming in. And then it was bewildering to see that these guys had stocked merchandise, that was given to the state to distribute, to those of us or those who amongst us are indigent, and then it was just there left to rot. Whether the plan was to share it during this circle of election, I don't know. It's crazy, but you would also, it also leads me, to speak to the fact that I think sometimes we pay the state too much. We raise the bar too much for them. I think that they are incompetent, really, and part of that incompetence is that they hadn't devised channels to spread, to share this goods, the Indomie, whatever it was that they had stocked there, just didn't have the channels to. It was never going to be effective, because the roll call that they have is simply the roll call that caters to members of the ruling party as it stands now. So sharing that would have been undemocratic, and it probably would have even caused problems sooner, even than later, especially if they try to do it during the pandemic, because once people knew where those things were during the pandemic, maybe a head SARS would have started during the pandemic. So that's the point that but I mean, this just allows me to ask, about, the demands. Having given this background, I'm a bit worried about the demands of ASUU. So, and this is something that, I've heard people say, especially critics of ASUU. So, Comrade Tope, I don't know, how would you respond to these critics, of the union who insist, depending on where you stand, that the demands by us is selfish? I've even heard someone say that if we sum it up, it comes up to total about 200 billion naira. And I ask because I don't get the feeling myself, really, that it caters to the struggle of teachers who essentially are workers themselves at the basic and primary levels. I don't know if this is scoping the demands too much or too beyond, scoping it outside, the reach of what ASUU is equipped to do. Because I mean, for instance, I don't see how the demands, IPPIS, salary reviews, even, I mean, and they are valid demands, don't get me wrong, but I don't really see what it means for the education sector, as a whole. I mean, I'm speaking from the basic up until the tertiary. I don't see, for instance, what it means for over 10 million students who are out of school. So I was wondering, if how would you respond to critics? Because I mean, not every Nigerian is sold on ASUU, to be honest. There are people who still think that the ASUU is asking too much.
Yes, I think you are right. I mean, in spite of the mass support that ASUU is gathering so far, I mean, we have got a number of critics, and I mean, on the side of ASUU has also been responsive. ASUU is not a union to run away from argument, polemics, and that's why ASUU, different members of ASUU, have been consistently providing relevant information to the public. Over the past few months, I can't count how many articles I've read from lecturers, across the country. I was just reading one from a lecturer from Kaduna State University this afternoon, making a mockery of the El-Rufai guy, the governor, because the governor had recently threatened to, sack the entirety of lecturers at Kaduna State University. What a backward proclamation by that short man.
Yeah, El-Rufai is Emeka's friend, though. No insult to him.
Are you serious?
No, at all. At all. He's his least favorite person.
I'm not even laughing, sir. Why did everybody bring that man into this conversation?
You don't mess Emeka with that. Sorry, continue.
That short man, So the guy came up with this whole thing that the ongoing strike action has nothing to do with state universities, and we all laughed. And I think the article from one of the lecturers back there, is quite interesting also because that the doctor really exposed the El-Rufai map for who he is, such an ignorant element. But the point to me is this: that it is true that to some extent we have quite a number of persons coming up publicly to say that the demands of ASUU are selfish. Appears to be selfish. Beyond that, again, most government officials they've said it. They've said this publicly, privately that ASUU is a selfish union. That ASUU is not interested in the collective unity of the country and what have you, and this and that and that. But we are asking them again to tell us what ASUU really is doing, wrongly. To begin with, are we saying that ASUU is not within? It is not within the ambit of ASUU to say that the universities have got to be properly funded? Because when you look at the question of revitalization of the university, revitalization funds, the funds that we are talking about are not going to the pockets of ASUU members. And I think that point has got to be made clearly. This money that they are all talking about, are expected to go to the coffers of each university for adequate buildings, for adequate laboratories, for lecture rooms. The point remains that across our university, even the University of Ibadan, we don't have mega lecture halls. You don't have mega lecture halls. Today, at the Faculty of Arts, the University of Ibadan, I don't think you have in existence a hall that will occupy 800 students, in a single class, in a single lecture class. I don't think that exists right now in the Faculty of Arts in the University of Ibadan.
I think, comrade, I think what, ASUU critics, depending on who you're listening to, are saying is this, that given the state of the Nigerian economy right now, all the sum of what ASUU demand will come to isn't something that the state can afford at the minute, right? And that it's enormous. The second bit that some critics and these critics I probably identify with myself as saying is that it's not even enough because ASUU has articulated this its demand in such a way that appears to be selfish, because it almost seems that IPPS is about their salary. Reviewing, so IPPS is basically saying that deductions are being made at source, if you're paying through using that portal, and then the dons, university lecturers say, oh, we have this system, we are sure that we're not being overcharged or charged outside what, So basically, it's about money, whether we're talking about IPPS, whether we're talking about remuneration, But for me, what I'm saying is, how about framing this demand such that it even takes in, teachers at lower levels, teachers who are even being paid as much as 400,000, not even as much as 150, because we're talking about the whole of the education. So it's almost as if ASUU is just thinking about the tertiary system, that level where they play at, and then, the guys below them can go and sort themselves out.
But you see, at the elementary, secondary level, at the elementary, primary, secondary level, they have their own union. The Nigerian Union of Teachers, NUT. The sad story of NUT today is that NUC right now is a subsector of the Nigerian ruling class. That union has been bastardized. Unfortunately, sadly, NUT has been pocketed by members of the ruling class in this country, to the point that the leadership of, the leadership of some chapters of this union, they play mobilizing role for politicians during electoral periods.
Confirm.
It is that bad. It is that bad.
Yeah.
In Lagos State, in
yeah,
the NUT, sorry, in Lagos State, the NUT, leadership sometimes held a symposium in honor of one of the past governors, in honor of his birthday. Can you imagine how backward it is? In Osun State recently, you know, they were involved in rally. They were involved in rally for APC candidates, the incumbent governor. They were on the street doing rally. You know, so it is that bad.
No, but comrade, I mean, but couldn't somebody argue? And I think you've done a good job of kind of dismissing some of the right-wing criticisms. You know, saying people who talk about, oh, it's too expensive, or the kind of El Rufais of the world, or that sort of thing. But I mean, the left-wing criticisms that say ASUU could speak up more for the education sector in general, or could represent a kind of vanguard for the working class more generally, I think might even be further inspired by the point you're making about NUT, and say, like, look, the absence of an NUT makes it even more important that the ASUU speak for the sector more widely rather than just for higher education. So how would you respond to that kind of left? Because it seems like Emeka was kind of raising both the critics from the right and left. I guess the left criticism is what, you know, we'd really wonder how you would respond. How you respond to, rather.
Yeah.
Is it the fact that you have so much unions within the university, within the educational sector itself today, is a product of the fact that the Nigerian state at various, moments have been able to, institutionalize this divide and rule tactics. Because, in the 80s, 70s, in the 80s, you only have a union, catering for, I think you only have 2 unions or so, catering for the entirety of the demands of members across the educational sector. In fact, ASUU used to be an appendix of the NLC. But over the years, what they did was to, destroy this relationship so that you cut off these ones and you use these ones for your own personal advantage whenever it suits you. That's what they do. It's just like what is happening with NURTW in Lagos State. The state government, yes, now, for you to have a practical understanding of what happened with unions in the educational sector, the Lagos State government dare come out publicly to say that they don't want to recognize NURT in Lagos State. Who are you? To make such demands, clearly because they want to have something to do with this, what is his name?
They went ahead to create their own parks and whatever, garages, something for him. So, like a parallel structure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that he will continue with his mobilizing role in the state. He's a mobilizer for them.
Political mobilizer.
So what it's the same thing they did with because it would have been interesting if you have, just a single union catering for the affairs of every worker. At the university level, some of us were even saying that this whole thing, NASU, SANU, ASUU, that to just have a single umbrella, But again, that's a product of, years of state infiltration. State infiltration. It's a product of it. But ASUU, we find out that ASUU, amongst these whole unions within the educational sector, appears to be the only union, talking about the commercialization of the educational sector. ASUU, no rejoinder that ASUU will write that this will not be stipulated, that the Nigerian state is commercializing the whole of components within the educational sector, including the elementary, the primary, down to the secondary, and down to the tertiary. You will find this in most agendas that have been written by the leadership of ASUU. You will find this well stated, and ASUU would forever say that education has got to be free across all board. I mean, that's a unifying statement. That's unifying statement that ASUU seems to be the only voice, echoing this publicly and privately. You see, we are operating under a very terrible condition today, and that is why you have these privileges here and there. Because ordinarily they shouldn't exist, but they want it to exist so that the unity. For instance, you should know that there's an attempt to, in fact, balkanize ASUU itself. I hope you are aware, comrades, that you now have some elements parading themselves as Konwa, or whatever their name is on the campuses. Konwa.
Is it like an acronym or something?
Yes, now Congress of National University of something. I will get Konus or something.
It doesn't roll up.
Acronym sounds whack.
Like a fraction.
It speaks volumes of you that you're not even interested in.
It doesn't roll off the tongue.
They are jokers, Why they are, in fact, because they broke out just the members elements, disenchanted and so-called disenchanted elements who we think are just they are nothing but elements that are just opportunistic. They are opportunists, that they are being opportunistic. That's what it is, because look at it. How would you break from ASUU without any concrete reason? No concrete, no basis for the disagreement, no basis. But again, we are aware of the fact that the minister of what is his name, labor and something, the guy, Ngige, we are aware of the fact that Ngige seems to be the spokesperson of that union. Can you imagine? Because Ngige at a point in time was proposing that they don't want to recognize ASUU, they want to recognize this backward something that just.
Okay. Yeah, comrade. I mean, it's nice to hear you talk about what ASUU has done in terms of broadly speaking to the tragedy within the educational sector. But I still, you don't have to go into details with this because I'm also not, unfortunately, I can't go into it, the way I'd love to. Because this whole conversation around ASUU is part of a left tradition, which I'm not sure still even exists within ASUU itself. And I'm speaking about how ASUU came to be formed, first as Association of University Teachers, I think in 1978. Hello? Oh, okay. First of all, under another acronym, but, more under this acronym in 1981. And then all of this happened, from the days of the Ali Mosque protests up until, the SAP era, So let's, and there are those people like me who think that, ASUU's, we might be experiencing a revival, I'm not sure how much of that would last, but before now, I'd say that ASUU's glory days were behind it. If as someone who knows, the history of where ASUU's has come from, and some of the most radical of our intellectuals in the academic space, have managed, to their credit, to articulate, what the problem is. And I think that's what you were speaking to in terms of when you were talking about the commercialization of the educational sector. They have managed to articulate the link between that and the infamous SAP of the 80s, as you know. And it's within, this broad context that, I think that the left critique, from some of us who have, sympathies for ASUU, but still think that it's not the union that it used to be in the 80s. I mean, like I said, I don't want to delve into this too much, because time might not even allow for us to exhaust it. But the truth of the matter is, there are radical intellectuals who led ASUU in terms of its leadership, and who actually, even leading up to its formation, whose actual work was actually within the working class, outside of, the university, and somehow thinking about where ASUU is today in terms of, I mean, I'm not casting any aspersions, but sometimes I think that within ASUU, some of the arguments that we make for other unions can be made for it in terms of it being watered down. There's no revolutionary verve in there anymore. And that's why, for some of us, some of the things, that ASUU talks about seems, a bit elitist. I don't know how you'd respond to that if you will. I mean, but basically that, I mean, it doesn't, their demands, however valid, don't quite reflect, the tragedy of the malaise of the Nigerian public education system, as it were.
But you see, this is it. Firstly, we must understand that ASUU rose, as an elitistic, union. That's like a middle class kind of thing. That's the origin of ASUU itself.
But forged links with the lower
yes,
class.
I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
The origin of ASUU is that basically a membership from the outset. Well, are members of the middle class really, and then to the point that during the formative period as such, you have some elements within the union who felt that our solidarity, our concern really should be geared towards what are the immediate challenges of our members. Solely the challenges of our members. We shouldn't go to the public to say that they are commercializing education. That shouldn't be our business. But you see, along the line, you then have this emergence of radical element within ASUU, and that is again not a given. Because socioeconomic conditions, clearly have their own way of pushing one into the, into a progressive reasoning. The emergence of activist scholars within the rank of, ASUU will change this trajectory, to the point that, ASUU led major struggles, against the Babangida SAP regime. Several special congresses were held, town hall meetings were held, ASUU, released several articles, educating the mass of the people that there's a need to stand against this whole SAP thing. That was then, ASUU led that struggle, side by side with several other members of civil societies. ASUU did this, and then, but you are correct again within the context of the fact that that revolutionary, tradition, indeed, as reduced when it comes to substance. That grip that revolutionary grip itself. But it is not just it is not just a challenge that ASUU seems to, it is not a challenge that is peculiar to ASUU alone. When you begin to look at what is happening with NLC also, you understand the fact that this is, there's a mass collapse of consciousness, actually, to the point that even at some of our congresses in recent times, you have some members who are, reactionary in a way, or who are of middle class orientation, saying that, our demands should solely be for salary. But the radical element within the leadership of us will not accept, that kind of self-serving position, and that. Yes, you have some elements who are saying that it should be salary. But again, if our members are saying it should be about salary, they are in a way, that's a legitimate demand again. I mean, that's not to say that it is not a legitimate demand. It is a legitimate demand because since 2009, the salaries that academics are collecting in this country was last due for review as far back as 2009, So, understanding the fact that inflation and what have you are then, suddenly, hijack the economy of the country.
Sorry, comrade. Sorry to cut you short there, but because of time, and I think that you've answered, the bulk of the question. So I'll just hand you over to OAG, or hand over rather to OAG, who I think has one or two questions. No, I think when Comrade Tokwe is done, we can come back to that.
Yeah. This way, I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Because I also would be a bit stubborn and say that I'm not even sure that the leadership of ASUU belongs to the radical elements on campus.
I'm quite going to touch on that now. Because
Yeah.
when something keeps happening, like over and over again, then it would be nice to have like a structural analysis of what's the root cause, of this problem. Why do we always have strikes in our, sectors in the country, especially with this educational sector? Because we are revolutionaries, we are Marxists, we understand that the political economic base, of this country is standing on primitive accumulation. It's a capitalistic one of a pseudo ruling class that is not advancing technology. It is not inventing new things. It only does the rent seeking. So in this context, if we are just selling if the backbone of our economy is oil and it's the crude oil and we just sell it, then can we say that the ruling class are just kind of giving a middle finger to education because they don't need to do anything and the country can thrive for them and survive if they just sell the oil? So they don't need to educate the country. They don't need to educate the young people. They're fine and okay with this system. Is that, in this context, why, I'm just trying to give like a background, is this a right analysis? And why does it seem like strikes, is never ending, or strikes are never ending in our country, at this point in time?
You've said it, comrade, we presently have a very predatory ruling class. And for a predatory ruling class, it is not interested really in moving the nation forward. It is not really interested in moving the people living in the nation forward in any way. That's the reality upon which we're facing today in society. To educate the oppressed will mean that you're teaching them how to stand against, how to resist you. But the Nigerian state really is not interested in that. The point is that let us keep the people, let us keep them uninformed. Let us keep them away from education so that they won't really know what their rights are. That's what so the Nigerian, ruling class is not interested in You know, because look at it, look at the elementary level. They are happy about the fact that you now have more private schools than, you know, public schools at the elementary, and they're happy. And look at what is happening in those places. Look at what is happening in the private schools.
Yeah.
You know, the private schools exist without anyone even checking up on them. No regulatory body. All sort of, you know, backward tendencies are happening in these places, and no one seems to be interested in them. You know the backward, you know, syllabus that they are dealing with. You know, the fact that some of these private schools are now, you know, brotels in making. You know, and no one really interested. You know, and most of our children are being kept in, you know, in the most backward you know, manner in the. I mean, perpetual darkness. That's what it is. They really, they are not giving what, I mean, a good touch of what education ought to be. You know, instead of being educated, they are being de-educated. You know, that's what these places are. You know, so you really, you know, mentioned it, the fact that we have a state that is not interested, and they've said this publicly that they don't have time for education anymore. You know, you can imagine they saying that, in fact, they are, in the long run, what they want is to auction these existing public universities. They want to auction the existing public universities. That is what it is. So we shouldn't, you know, we shouldn't joke with the fact that we have this backward element, and it is not because I mean, it's not because they have to do this because they are in monies. No, this is I mean, this is it's an agenda that is bigger than money. You know, it is an agenda.
Because most people would think that the ruling class, they're just, you know, maybe stupid and all. But if we look at it, there's been an upward transfer of wealth, privatization of everything, and then which is leading to the destruction of what we call our public institutions. And then we are seeing private ones, more expensive ones, which is essentially putting education out of the reach of poor people and the masses. Anyway, you know, but this is going to cascade into my own next question, because when you see education being totally defunded and it's now looking as if it's not a way to go in this country. So I'm not sure if you probably have heard in the streets when the kids or the young ones say school na scam or who school help. You know, will we say is school really or fast becoming a scam in this country, or is it my own personal opinion? Or why is it that school has, you know, or education generally has been seen in that light, you know, by youths in Nigeria? Because most people can't care about, you know, or don't even care about going to school anymore. You know, so why is that scam thing, school now scam thing? Why is it gaining ground now, you know, all among the youths and the young people in the country?
Expensive shit.
Expensive shit.
Not really expensive shit too.
Yeah. So I don't know. I want to get your own take on that. Like, do you feel that school is becoming a scam now in this country?
I mean, it's a reflection of the bigger agenda of the ruling class, really, to make education not fashionable. You know, I mean, part of the whole thing. Like, look at it. You have this ongoing, you know, talk show or whatever they call it. You know, Big Brother Nega something. You know, an expression of vanity, you know, modernity. An expression of modernity, really. And
I disagree.
But let's come back to that.
And I propose that we have this conversation someday.
No, definitely.
We
can talk about the revolutionary potential of.
But you see,
Big Brother.
There's a man, which I mean every of our community here knows about, you know, Malcolm X. He had said that everything you touch must be viable for your progression. You know, everything you touch, everything you do, everything you engage in must be instrumental to your liberation. If it's not instrumental to your liberation, then to hell with it. You are going to throw it into the trash can, you know. I mean, that's what it is. So for me, we are currently living in a society that prioritizes modernity, and that is why the educational sector today, appears to be, an anachronistic sector, suddenly education has become unfashionable in this country. And you're correct. I mean, I deal with students every now and then, and you get to see their lack of receptiveness to knowledge. This society is not a knowledge-driven society anymore, and that's why we are not producing knowledge. At first, in fact, some of our lecturers, they are only consuming knowledge. They are not producing, because you are not being encouraged to produce knowledge anymore. Unlike the days where you have so much scholars, on the continent coming up with theories. You have Bala Usman, you have Bade Onimode, you have Klodake, you have Wataruni, and all of these guys on the continent, contributing to political theory, to the field of political theory and what have you. We have, we have a data of that. We have,
now being reduced to existential living.
Exactly, existential living. That's what it is. And you see, again, we are living in a society where the government currently think that it is not their business to create jobs. It is not their business to build factories. It is not their business to engage youth. It is not their business to employ people anymore. Therefore, you then have an army of poor people on the street. You then have an army of unemployed youth on the street.
Extreme neoliberal government. Exactly.
So under that condition, sometimes ago I was reading it, I think in the Daily, about a particular first class guy, that went into farming. And you see, what is happening today across the campuses? This neoliberal IMF agenda that is happening. They are now teaching students about this call it entrepreneurial skills.
Yes, I heard of what they call that shit in NYC back then. They started teaching for a long time.
It's not a course. So
that's terrible.
At the under level you do it, and at the 400 level you do it also. So imagine now they bring entrepreneur things. So they will invite barbers, they will invite tailors, they will invite, I think.
By the way, I should say at this point that I've started doing makeup. So if anyone wants to have their makeup done after the episode,
I'm going to event planning myself.
we can discuss afterwards.
You're making soap.
So yeah, just want to shout out my brand.
We will invite you to one of the entrepreneurial class.
Yeah, thanks.
This is the people pay for invitation? Do you pay for invitation?
They will give them honorarium now. They will give So you see, let me tell you. So there's this joke about last week or so. Someone was telling me of one of the entrepreneurial class sessions. By the way, imagine your ward being in the Department of Medicine. Now they have to bring the barber to come to the classroom to come and teach or the Faculty of Law. That this is how you become. Imagine all this kind of madness. What you are saying is that educational, but it's intentional. So sometimes ago, someone was telling me about a joke. In one of these classes, they invited, I think, what's his name now? I think a carpenter also, was invited to the campus, and of course, non-literate and what have you. So the guy was at the podium, saying that education is a waste of time.
Going back to school not scam, school help.
He was saying this, in the university, not outside the university, and he was speaking to students that education is a waste of time, that they should look at him as a carpenter. He never went to school, but he's doing this and you can imagine that that's a country, you can imagine that level of
it's quite sad, it's quite sad. And, maybe to bring all these things into focus, now we are approaching 2023 elections now, and I don't know, maybe just to ask if you have your own candidates, and if you do, what kind of political political program do you envision that you should take a front role in improving and securing education, in Nigeria at all levels now? Because we've talked about the primary, tertiary, and the secondary education. So if you have a candidate, then what kind of political program would you like to see?
Oh, I mean, ordinarily, you see, no society can progress without a viable educational sector. No society. We need a literate society. A literate society, a society where schools will not be considered as a place where you have to make money. But a place where you have to produce knowledge. But today our universities are, in fact, paying more attention to how they can be producing pure water, selling. You can imagine universities, how they can be selling bread, how they can be selling water, pure water and all of that. So universities now see themselves as factories, which is so unbelievable. So for me, there is a necessity for us to see that education is not only free, but a qualitative education, it's been made to be free. And this whole thing around accessibility must also be reckoned with. Our people must be given necessary access to a free and qualitative educational setting. In the sense that the schools have got to be open for all. Because we are talking about knowledge. We are talking about people understanding where they are coming from, where they are, and where they are still going. We are talking about people understanding their immediate environment. How can you deny people that right? The right of knowing their environment, the right of knowing themselves, the right of knowing what their tomorrow will be like, or taking part in building their future, their tomorrow. So for me, we have insisted that a government that would stand for a free and qualitative educational sector is what we need at this material point in time. Not one that is talking about PPP, public-private partnership, for the educational sector. The private people invited to own some something, and that's a useless, proposal. We are saying that more monies have got to be pumped into the educational sector, but beyond that, the syllabus, the teaching materials and what have you have got to be decolonized also, because it is not just enough to have all these monies. You have these monies for what purpose? Education should be geared towards a particular goal. Geared towards a certain goal, not just the fact that you want to be educated. You want to be educated for what purpose? So we must create that understanding that education must be for a purpose. At different points in time, the oppressors have understood this, and that's why they try as much as possible to distance people from education. Are we talking about a kind of education where people really do not know who they are? So the kind of education that our government, would possibly stand for is one that will be decolonized, totally decolonized, not these backward things that seems to be going on at the elementary and
Comrade, I've noticed that you've hesitated to pick a particular candidate, which is you've given a very political answer, which is fine. Which of course is fine.
My inability to do that, speaks for itself on the basis of what I've said so far.
Indeed.
There's no candidate on the ballot who is talking about what you are interested in.
Absolutely no. From the obedient to the articulate to the Emilocon, these are all terrible human beings.
So, how about you, alright?
Well, yes, that's our man, but unfortunately, our man also stands with PPP, So, I'm not really, but I mean, that's that's a faster pace compared to all this
No, of course.
middle guys and what have you.
Articulate obedience.
But I mean, whatever it is, we will not stand with any PPP kind of arrangement.
Yeah.
PPP
On a much lighter note, but I think you
Yeah.
want to talk about music now. Just
So I mean, as we tie it up, and that's fair if you want to hold your political preferences closer to the chest, and we'll definitely come back to talk about some of the the wider policy issues around education as we we delve into kind of the political campaign season further. But comrades, to just wrap it up, on a slightly different note, one thing we've noticed is you are, aside from being a radical historian and an ASUU member, also a musician. And in fact, we see that you're holding a saxophone right here in your profile picture. So I don't want to drag you too far into that, but I just wondered if you want to say a little bit about your music, and then also just maybe let us know and let the audience know maybe where they can actually find your music if they want to.
Yes, I play afrobeat. I'm an instrumentalist. I play tenor saxophone, and I'm also the lead vocalist of an afrobeat band. We call it Aluta band. And by the way, we'll be honoring Fela, 25th ancestral passage of Fela Kuti, at our space in Lagos, at space in Lagos, African. This coming Sunday, we shall be doing that.
Good. Where's the space in Lagos? Where's the space in Lagos?
Ayobo. Wait, Baja. Very close.
Okay. Baja.
Yeah,
okay.
mainland.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll actually share a link to that in the description of this episode, so that people who are in town can join, and then people who are not in town can feel bad about not being
or watch virtually, whatever.
Exactly.
But you see, for me, I see more music now. Like, I'm beginning to understand it to be more of like, it's a burden that I see myself carrying, in the sense that I cannot really drop it. Particularly, I'm playing a kind of music that, unfortunately, today stands not to be fashionable. We are holding on to the line, like Khalid Wahmed would say, hold on to the line, which is what some of us seems to be doing. In the sense of playing liberationist music, revolutionary music, and that are not fashionable right now.
That's absent in the music scene.
Yeah, but my entrance into music started. I mean, I grew up understanding music. I mean, in my household, everyone growing up loved music. My dad, I would say, was an unprofessional musician, in the sense that he would sing late into the night. Whatever he was doing late in the night, he's in the bedroom, he would sing, whatever, he would sing all these, folk songs, Yoruba folk songs, and what have you. And I grew up under that condition, and we would dance, we would sing, and all that. But I didn't really, growing up, I didn't think of myself going into music fully. I mean, for me, I grew up understanding that I wanted to be a teacher. I've been teaching all my life. I used to say this to people, because I can remember myself, as a very young boy. I think GS3 boy or so. I would gather the old kids in the compound, and I would begin to teach them. I would spend some of my, pocket money to buy shop, to teach children in the compound, because I grew up in face me face with typical Lagos style house or something. So that was it. But at a point in my life, someone introduced me to Fela. I was introduced to Fela actually. Although it wasn't Fela at first, it was this guy, Beautiful India. I don't know if any of the comrades have heard of him.
Yeah, well, I know Beautiful Nubia.
He was my point of entrance into revolutionary music, not even Fela, not Fela's Afrobeat. I met, and there's this particular track that I mean, this was in the early 2000s or so. What did you do? Omojuri, that is translation, what the eyes, have seen, what the eyes have seen, Omojuri. And in that particular number, this man, demystified colonialism. Within, I think it was just for 3 minutes or so, 3 minutes and some seconds, track. Spoke about our experiences under slavery, under colonialism, within just this minute, and I was amazed. I mean, I've heard about these narratives and all, but I've never understood the fact that music can actually play the role of the compendium in the sense that you can compile all of these experiences, all of these narratives of several pages, of several hours, of several years, of several centuries within just a space of 3 minutes and 20 seconds. You can compile them in a single track, music. I didn't see that coming. And then I listened to that particular track because I grew up understanding that music is just anything, like particularly the beat, dance, and there's nothing more to music other than dancing. Until I came across Beautiful Nubia, the entirety of my understanding, we became friends, the entirety of my understanding. But even at that point, I wasn't interested in playing this style of music, because I mean, for me, yes, the messages are great, but I was searching for something that the ordinary street can connect to directly. Like I can, I mean, looking back, I knew that there was something missing aside from the messages and what have you. By the way, Nubia sings in Yoruba language, Then, not long after that time, I came across Fela. And everything changed totally. My interest in music, everything changed. Like I then understood that the powerfulness within music is real. It is not something that exists in the abstract. That it exists. And then since then, I've been a committed Afrobeater.
We'll have to, in fact, we'll have to have you back to talk more about your musical biography, at a later stage. Not only because I think it connects with a lot of our wider interest on the show, but because it's interesting in itself. So, Comrade, at this point, I'll just say a thank you not only for, letting us know a little bit about you and your music, but also for the wider conversation about ASUU and the ongoing struggle to transform the education sector. So thanks again for making time to speak with us today. And, hope you'll be able to join us again down the line.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. It was nice and very insightful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It was nice having you, Chief.
It's a pleasure, brother.
Nice one.
More power to you. I mean, because this is a great initiative. We need independent platforms such as this. That tells us the things that the mainstream media won't tell us, won't expose us to. So more power to everyone.
Yes, please continue to watch us, please. We need as much of that as possible. But no, I appreciate that. So nice one, man. So we'll let you go. Yeah.
All
so
right.
talk soon, then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And folks, don't forget to head over to our Patreon.
Yeah, check Patreon out.
We need to grow this community, as it were.
Yeah. Well, to graduate. All right.